This is Election Talk. Election Talk with attorney Carrie Harper on Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are back at it again. You know, it is the season, and it's my favorite season of the year. It's election season, and this election could not be more important. We are going to have on the ballot for the first time in history the first female and female woman of color running for president. And anybody who was out there day drinking after the debate with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, worried and just about to go ahead and just say, forget it, I'm not doing anything. I think we have a new breath of life that's been breathed into us. So we're going to be talking to political candidates. It's not just going to include the judges, but yes, it's all about the judges. So what do we have on calendar today? We have two judicial candidates today. We have George Turner, who's going to be first up running for judge. And we also have Sharon Ransom, who's going to follow. And we'll have a guest, and we're going to open up the phone lines. The phone is back working again. So if you all want to go ahead and call in, you can feel free to do so at that 310-520-KJLH, 310-520-KJLH. And we'll take some calls. And the judicial candidates have agreed to stick around, and you can ask questions of them directly yourself. That was redundant, but we're gonna get to. We're also going to cover some of the deadlines and some of the important things you need to know about the election. And we'll go into that more with next week's guests. We're going to have folks that are directly related to the election, who are working in the election, and who have control about certain things that you can do, certain rules, because we want you to be fully informed. And my thing that I like to say, when in doubt, go ahead and vote and at least do a provisional ballot. And then you can fuss about it later. But don't fail to vote. No matter what, vote. Okay? So, starting off with George Turner Jr., he's a lifelong resident of Inglewood. He's a proud UCLA alumni and dedicated attorney. He's running for seat 39. And he was a valedictorian at Morningside High School, which I think we beat in softball when I went to Union High School. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about that.
Here we go.
He graduated summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa at UCLA. He says what shaped his commitment to justice, and the community service. Mr. Turner, I didn't get to interview you for the primaries, but I'm so happy you're here now. Tell me why you want to be a judge.
Ooh, okay. So there's a variety of reasons. So being born and raised in Inglewood, California, I was raised smack dab in the middle of this thing we call mass incarceration. So starting back when I was in middle school, I had friends, family, and community members who ended up in camp and county jail, prisons. And I said, this has to change. You know, something has to change. I became a public defender. I've been a public defender for 15 years. Was really into directly representing my community every day in court. Worked in Inglewood, worked in Compton, worked in airport, worked at the Metro Court, worked in downtown Los Angeles. And I was like, I want to continue to fight in trials to help my community. And then eventually what happened was the laws began to change. So the laws began to change, and it gave opportunities for folks to not have to sit in custody for, low-level crimes, and also to give, certain opportunities for folks who might have mental health issues or issues with drug addiction. And I said, you know what? It would be a great opportunity as a bench officer to be able to continue to help my community by applying the laws as they currently stand. And so that was kind of the first part of my decision, right? First was, I wanted to apply the laws that currently stands, sort of help my community. And then the second question is like, why run as opposed to be appointed? Mm-hmm. And, as a local kid, I said, everything that I've done with the support of my community. Whether it be graduating valedictorian from Morningside or going to UCLA, everything that I've done has been local and community-based. And so when I thought about how I would become a judge, I said, well, I'm going to do the same thing that I've always said. I'm going to depend on the community to support me. And that's why I decided to run.
Well, alrighty then. I see that you're married to a therapist.
I am.
How has that shaped your defense of folks at the public defender's office?
Yes. So, excuse me. So for years, my wife worked at the Department of Mental Health, and we had very similar clients. In fact, many times we had the same clients. And what I learned is that, well, first and foremost, what I learned is that you have to consider a person as a whole person, as opposed to what's in a police report, as opposed to just what's going on in a particular case. You have to really consider a person in all of their circumstances. Many of my clients have mental health issues. My wife loves to tell me that I can't diagnose people. She's like, you have all of these people and you think that you haven't read the DSM.
What's the DSM?
It is the Bible for people for diagnosis. So it's I forget the specific a name for it, the specific acronym, but it is the book that they use to diagnose clients. Okay. She says, you're not allowed to, or it's out of your scope. What she loves to say is it's out of your scope of practice to diagnose people with any condition, right? But, when you're working as a public defender, you can identify someone who has, mental health issues. You can identify someone who's suffering from auditory hallucinations. It's pretty clear, right? You can identify someone who may be bipolar, but she's like, you don't have the ability or the skill or the training to be able to specifically identify them. Said, excuse me, no, I might not be able to specifically identify them. However, I know that putting them in a cage for 3 years isn't going to fix that, right? So being able to connect them with community-based programming, government programming, being able to help them with housing, these are all issues that I know that they need help with, and being able to have like a specific therapist who is knowledgeable about those sort of resources has been very helpful, or was very helpful in my practice for many, many years.
Let me ask you a two-part question, just parlaying on that. Do you feel that the judicial system has criminalized mental illness?
I think that is pretty clear. Many of my clients are folks who have serious mental health issues, and many of the things that result in criminal charges are a direct result of mental health issues.
And as a judge, how will you help shape, how will you help those folks who are in your courtroom for nothing more than kind of just not being all there, who they're having some mental challenges, not being mentally available? What can you do? And are your hands tied a little bit?
So, for years my hands was tied as a public defender. But there's the laws have changed, as I said. So there's this thing called mental health diversion. Okay, so mental health diversion is something that passed about 2017, 2018, I believe. And it allows for people who have mental health issues, people who are willing to go into treatment, and people who you can draw a direct connection between their conduct and their mental health issue. They can get access to programming. And once they finish, they successfully complete their programming and get access to the resources that the court has access to, their cases can be dismissed. So judges are the final determiner of whether or not someone has access to mental health diversion. And I know as a public defender, there were many, many times where you put together a nice packet, you get an expert to identify the person's mental health diagnosis, you get them to recommend a program, you find a program for someone, and then it goes before the court. Excuse me, it goes before the court, and the court says, well, maybe not for this case, maybe for another case, or, this person has a history. And I'm like, well, what does that have to do with this particular case? So, yes, my hands aren't tied, particularly with mental health diversion. And there are a variety of other different diversions now. So that law has changed, has expanded to, there's veterans diversion. There's just judicial diversion. So that's part of the reason why I want to be a judge. I want to be able to give access to folks who really, really are suffering.
Right. Okay. And what other reasons would there be?
What are the reasons?
To be a judge? I mean, you're doing good. What division are you in at the Public Defender's Office?
Currently, I work, ironically, in I am the deputy in charge of the homeless mobile unit. So our specific unit, our specific edict is to help folks who are unhoused get their records cleared. So whether it be through expungements, whether it be through vacatures or any other sort of legal option, our specific job is to help our unhoused neighbors get their records cleared.
How many folks are in that unit? Wasn't Holly Hancock in that unit?
Yes, Holly, my dear friend Holly Hancock was definitely in that unit. And it's a unit that's been around for a while. Originally, the unit was we used to actually just go into encampments and knock on doors and say, hey. But what we found over the last couple of years is that isn't as effective because it's almost like a solicitation because the encampment is usually someone's home. So what we're doing now is we're joining with community-based programming and governmental agencies to show up to resource fairs. So where unhoused folks come to get toiletries and get their IDs, we actually say, hey, would you also like to get your would you like to get your record cleared? So we've partnered with a lot of different organizations. We've partnered with churches. We have a few standing, what we call homeless courts. So we have a homeless court in downtown Los Angeles on Skid Row. We have one in Lancaster. We have one in Long Beach, excuse me. And what we do there is, like I said, people come in and they get their record cleared.
How is that going to be affected by... we've been seeing a little bit on the news with Governor Gavin Newsom, who has shown up in his work clothes and work boots, clearing out encampments and seeming to refer to counties who weren't clearing out their encampments as being in violation of whatever they need to do to get that state money. And he didn't really name our wonderful mayor. He didn't really name our wonderful county, but it seemed like he was talking about us. How is that going to affect your ability to find these folks and help get their records expunged and give them work?
So, it's funny. The unhoused population is very, very diverse in Los Angeles County. We do see a lot of encampments, but what I found is that there's a large and growing number of people who are working 40 hours a week and are unhoused. And that's something that people really don't know or understand. Many of our unhoused neighbors are folks who may be serving your food, folks who may be supplying you things at retail places, who might be working at nonprofit organizations and government organizations serving the community.
Or might be going to school or undergrad and law school.
Correct.
Didn't hear from me. Go ahead.
Exactly, right? I won't judge, right? But absolutely, there are folks who are what you would call productive citizens who are unhoused. And these are people who quite literally just they've already demonstrated that they are moving forward. They want to actually change their lives. They've made maybe one or two bad decisions, or quite simply, they can't afford housing, right? Because housing in Los Angeles County is very, very expensive. I was doing the math. I mean, a one-bedroom apartment is $2,000 or $3,000 a month now.
At least two, yeah.
I mean, that's what, $72,000 a year?
And then that's not including security deposit and
that's not including food.
Right.
That's not including transportation. That's $72,000 as a single person, $72,000 a year, right? So, many of our unhoused neighbors are folks who simply can't make that bar, right? And so being able to get, an old misdemeanor off of their record, being able to get an old felony from the 80s or the 90s off their record might help them get a better job or a promotion. Like I have clients who come in and say, look, I've been working at this job for the past 7 years. I am eligible for a management position. My managers will tell me, hey, I want to give you this management position, but I can't pass the background check. Or they'll say, I'm working as a subcontractor for an organization, but I can't pass the background check to become a member of the full organization. And now I'm stuck at this sort of ceiling. It's ironic because, when I first show up, it's like, wow, you are really working 40, sometimes 50 hours a week, and you're unhoused. So yeah, that's something that I'm very, very passionate about. It's something that's really surprising. And I think that is contributing a lot to the expansion of the unhoused population. I think that we have this image of folks who are kind of mentally ill and doing drugs, and there are people like that. But I think that what's really overall contributing to this sort of explosion is the cost of housing and so many people who are working full time and just can't afford to make ends meet.
And how do you feel about activist judges? And what I mean by that, the judges putting their thumb on the scale of justice, being a 13th juror. I'm sure you've experienced a little bit of that.
I have no knowledge of what you're talking about.
Right. Deniability. Okay.
No. So, activist judges. I think that's a term that is really, really interesting. I personally think that we would benefit if we know everyone's background. I think that what we've done too often in court is, you have a judge. He or she sits on the bench. He has a robe. You don't know anything about that person. Mm-hmm. And then they can claim a sort of objectivity, right? I am just an objective person. And then what happens is that you don't know anything about their background. But then if you do any sort of research, you find out that overwhelming number of people who are on the bench now are either former prosecutors or folks who come from big law, right? And they have a specific perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And then that perspective becomes the objective perspective of the law.
Why do you think so many prosecutors have become judges as opposed to defense attorneys, private sector, civil attorneys?
Yes, and just to be very clear, Holly Hancock, my friend, she was one of the first public defenders ever to be elected judge in Los Angeles County. She was actually the first, and that was just in the last election. If I am elected, I will be the first black man elected as a public defender in Los Angeles County if I'm elected. So why is it? I believe because the law is a situation where it's very insular and people sort of create a tradition, and that tradition is recreated over and over again. So the tradition was for years that you become a prosecutor, you prosecute for a few years, and either you have a connection with someone at the governor's office and they appoint you, mm-hmm. or you can say, I am a prosecutor, and for many years that's who folks were voting for because judges are supposed to keep people safe, and if you're a former prosecutor, you keep people safe, and that's what people were voting for. Mm-hmm. And so it's created a sort of insular situation on the bench. And I think that it is high time to sort of diversify the bench, right? I think it's time to create a bench where it's more in tune with what the community knows, right? And that's another reason why I'm running. I want the community to know who I am.
Okay. Well, listen, how can the community get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I am on all the social medias, right? My IG is Turner, the number 4, because 4 is my favorite number, Judge. Mm-hmm. I'm also on Facebook. It's just George A. Turner Jr. And I also have a website. It's George A. Turner, the number 4, judge.com. And I also respond to emails. Email address is George Turner 4judge@gmail.com.
And we'll put that up on the website because some folks will actually email you and they will have a dialogue with you. So
I have responded.
I believe you. Okay, so we're gonna conclude with George Turner, but you're gonna stick around because we're gonna open up to a few phone calls at the end. And folks want to call in 310-520-KJLH 310-520-KJLH.